welcome to ZZ Talk Features, a standalone segment in which I, my co-host, or both of us, invite a guest to talk on or shed light on a topic that we normally wouldn't be able to dive as deep into without said guest. Today, I've invited a guest whom I could talk about a few things with. We could talk about Arsenal Football Club. We could talk about, you know, the chiropractic arts. But today, we are actually going to be talking about Native American issues. My guest today is Graham Denton. Graham, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so Graham, so I know you, like I've known you for about 7 years or so. I say 7 years because my first distinct memory of you was when I tore my patella tendon and you were there with a bag of ice when we thought it was a sprained knee. But I think we've been like friends, like actual friends for more like 4-ish years, which is when I moved back from like the Virginia, DC area. If you could tell us a little bit about yourself.
As far as Native American perspective goes, my mom is full-blood Cheyenne, and we're both members of the southern band of the Cheyenne Arapaho tribe. Grew up in Monroe, Michigan, and met you because of going to Atlanta for chiropractic education. And yeah, as far as I guess she would want me to say that her mother's name is Jane Wolfeathers, and that my great-grandfather's name was Harold Lone Lodge, and he was actually chief. And my other great-grandfather's name was Grasshopper Island, and he was Medicine Man, and that's not really common because it's in Native American culture, you can't give power to both families for that type of position in the tribe. And so, I think she would have wanted me to say that first to introduce myself, I guess, in this context.
So it's uncommon for both. So you're saying your mom, both sides of your mom's family had the kind of status that it's uncommon to have for both sides of a family. Did I catch that?
Yes, because it's a matriarchal society, and you never want to have chief and medicine man in the same family line, because then, well, you're just worried that power would be abused. You would hope that those people were good and wouldn't abuse that situation. So it's all fascinating because I'm exploring all of that right now. My uncle who passed away has told me a lot about the family lineage, and like him, he said it's hard because you hit a roadblock because there was a courthouse fire. And so you literally have to go back and talk to people and ask them if they knew the family name Island. And that's on the reservation in Cheyenne, Oklahoma. And my mom is originally from Tahlequah, Oklahoma, which is the end of the Trail of Tears, but that's more associated with the Cherokee tribe. And my dad's a member of that tribe. But I find myself in Monroe, Michigan, because he very much wanted to pursue a career in this specific chiropractic technique. And a gentleman who was living in Monroe, Michigan at the time, he invented it. And so my dad ended up taking over his practice after he passed away. And so, yeah, that's how we find ourselves in Monroe, Michigan, all the way from Tahlequah, Oklahoma, or the end of the Trail of Tears.
Okay. So, all right. So in that time that I have known you, I gotta say, I never really thought, yeah, Graham's Native American. Now, in hindsight, makes sense. Yeah, I can look at you and say, yeah, you look Native American. But I think also I probably just thought, yeah, Graham is just a really tan white guy, or he's like, mix of like, yeah, Hispanic and something else. So I guess my question is, Did you ever feel like one, you had to, or two, you were suppressing your Native American identity at any point in your life? Um, like um, whether it's to fit in, or do you think that that's not something that you've ever really like dealt with?
Yes, I would say that suppression of it for a lot of my life to fit in Monroe County. Um, the demographic is mostly suburban white to um, agriculture white was a mix. Not as much, but suburban white, I would say at the high school, that was the majority. I think out of the high school, which was about 2,500, it was either 45 black people in the graduating class or the school as a whole. And I can't remember that, but I want to say just the graduating class, which was 250. That might make more sense. But yeah, if you, I forget the name of this guy, but he went to Harvard, but he wrote it's a short story called "The Token Black Friend," and a friend of mine who recently sent that, and not all of his experiences, not the worst experience in his story, where he gets called the N word, and that's the most powerful part of that story, but all the mannerisms and the way he thought. He was raised in a very exclusively rich East Coast white suburb, and just his identity crisis, if you will, which is what he calls it. And you could say, in a sense, that that's what I've had. But in a deeper context, that could be related to past U.S. government policy of why you might think of me possibly as a white person with a bit of a tan.
Right. Okay. Um, well, we're going to get into U.S. policy. I feel like that's going to be a longer conversation. But before we get into that, um, before we started recording, I asked you about whether you were the one who posted something about Mulan, right? Because I was thinking, right, if there's anyone's Facebook feed that lives by the mantra, um, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere," it's probably yours, because I've seen you post or share posts regarding um, Native American stuff, but also regarding Black Lives Matter, regarding how problematic the movie Mulan is because of Disney's use of sites where I believe I think they had, I think the Chinese government has Muslim slaves in the, yeah, you see, I didn't do my research too much on that yet, because my co-host and I are actually going to talk about that in a future podcast. But the point being that you try to shine a light on a lot of different issues. And I bring that up to ask, just from a human perspective, do you ever feel like a lot of a lot of marginalized groups are getting the spotlight shone on their issues, and yet it doesn't seem like the same level of what's the word I'm looking for? The same level of care is given to issues dealing with the Native American population. Do you ever feel like that's the case?
Hmm. I'd say yeah, but I think I could understand that because maybe through this whole experience in the past couple of months, I think the main prevailing thought is trying to put myself in someone, in someone else's shoes, basically. And so, in that context, why would someone be able to put themselves in the shoes of a Native American? Maybe there might be a couple of reasons that wouldn't be good, but yeah, I just understand why they couldn't identify. as that, and why they wouldn't care too much. I think Chris Rock maybe one time had a joke, and it was really good. And it was something along the lines of, I see, I've seen two polar bears walking down the street before two Native Americans. Where are they at? And it just shows, yeah. Why would you be able to identify with that? And sometimes it's interesting. I think sometimes people are surprised that we exist at times when they meet me. Oh, you are? That sort of way. And it's and maybe because, like you touched on before, of how I was trying to identify and at that time in my life, and succeeded in my opinion, in being raised in white suburbia. I look back now and I sort of got a free pass. Whereas I would walk into a room, I might be identified as white, and I really, to be honest, I never experienced much oppression in Monroe County. Maybe one or two instances, but that could have been for a different reason too, now that I think of it. So in that sense, and looking not to identify myself, it would be hard to ask other people to identify. And so, yeah, but I've been appreciative of terms like BIPOC and things like that, where, I was surprised that some people who approached me, who either are associated or not associated with Black Lives Matter, were interested in advancing Native American rights in Monroe County, of all places. I was shocked, actually, that people were interested in and thought the way that I thought, perhaps, about a few symbols in the county. But I could definitely understand why someone wouldn't be able to identify with Native American rights and issues. I myself am doing extensive research right now just to catch up myself on some things, and it's deeply complex because there are so many tribes, just so many tribes everywhere, and it's you have different issues like being federally recognized as a tribe versus not federally recognized rights. And when you talk about that, you're talking about millions of dollars in contracts from the U.S. government that go to minority-owned businesses through those contracts. Usually they're only awarded to hopefully federally recognized tribes of the United States government, because in a sense that is a blood right. When I say that my mom and I are full members of the Cheyenne Arapaho tribe, that means we are card-carrying members who unfortunately have to prove our blood right, because all of this is in context with the U.S. government having these mechanisms in play because of what we went through as a people at their hands. And so that's why you have such things like, again, 5% of the U.S. government contracts for the government are awarded to minority-owned businesses. And that's why it might be important in today's capitalist society to be certain how to identify as Native American also. It has a lot. It's, again, that's just one topic that I could talk about that's just so fascinating between all the tribes that's happening. And of course, there's plenty of disagreement.
So you say that in order to be, I guess, eligible for those U.S. government contracts, you have to be federally recognized as a tribe. So
you would hope so, actually.
Right. So a tribe of a quote unquote tribe of Native Americans, if they're not federally recognized, would then be denied minority contracts in that case? Or like I'm trying to understand, because
so you would hope that would be the case, but there was a story in the LA Times in about, I believe, 2016, 2018, can't remember. But it talked about actually this exact thing, and how one tribe in Missouri is under hot water because they're trying to prove their genealogy as Native Americans, and they've had federal contracts through this context. You might talk to some natives, especially those who have grown up on on reservations of federally recognized tribes, and they'd feel like they were stealing from their blood right, basically, if you can't prove that, and
Okay,
you're getting a government contract.
so okay, so just so I get this clear, so these aren't necessarily contracts based on being a minority group. These are contracts based on being a Native American group, right? Because I guess the allotment is separate.
I don't think so in that context, but we are the only group that has to typically prove with the U.S. government through a blood right that we are. Whereas Black and Latinx people might more so just need to be a cultural identification as opposed to saying, here's my card.
Right.
The context of that story too is you would hope that people potentially pretending to be Native American were not awarded these contracts, and that's what the LA Times was uncovering quite a bit. And so that's just one fascinating thing that I just uncovered recently. It's there's certain hierarchies too for Native American identification. Growing up on a reservation versus not growing up on a reservation. You could use terms that might be a little hurtful to myself, but I could completely understand. Such as they would say that the reason I've excelled in white suburbia is because the United States policy of eradicating us did work because I've been colonized. I've assimilated into the colonizer's culture, basically. They might use terms like apple, which means red on the outside, but white on the inside. And I can understand that. It's a hierarchy, an identification where maybe some people wouldn't follow me if I started a movement to increase Native American rights.
You're saying some people within the, I guess, Native American culture, or some Native American people wouldn't follow you because they believe that you are, white on the inside. Therefore, maybe your voice doesn't carry as much weight. Is that what you mean?
Maybe I've lost my way because I'm not culturally tied to the tribe like others choose to be, because I haven't grown up in tribal tradition over and over, as opposed to maybe they have.
Sort of like a purity test almost. Yeah.
Kind of in a way, yeah. And it's fascinating to me in that context. I mean, I love my uncle, but one of his ex-wives referred to my family as this, and it's just like, wow, this is it was the first I was so young I had to ask, what, like, is that a bad thing?
Yeah, I'm 31 years old, and that is the first time I've ever heard the term. So yeah, it's new to me.
Absolutely. And it's, again, there's so many facets of Native American identity and Native American rights and tribal rights, and what different tribes, what their inspiration and motivation is going forward and what they want. There are critiques that you could make, and of course be proponents of it too. It's multifaceted and multi-leveled for sure. And it being a matriarchal society makes it all the more fascinating, especially, unfortunately, when you have terms like hashtag MMIW, murdered or missing Indigenous women, and that represents the issue of that. And it's a polarity because we're a matriarchal society, yet we have an issue, abuse of women, obviously, in Canada and the United States. It's a major issue. There's a lot of missing women that their cases have gone unsolved locally, federally, and at the state level.
Oh, okay. Let me get into a bit of a lighter topic. Except it's really not that light. But so as alluded to, prior to you moving back to Michigan, you were over here in Georgia, and so the next topic is regarding Georgia sports, but really sports in general. So the Atlanta Braves, right? They have the tomahawk chop. And then you've got the Cleveland Indians, who literally have a Native American as their mascot. And it's sort of a thing that's pervasive throughout sports. As the debate around the now known Washington football team, as the debate around their former team name was going on, I would see some Native Americans really angry about it, and others being like, "Oh, it's fine. We told them it's okay." Um, what is your okay, what was your feeling around, let's say, if you ever went to a Braves game and they'll do the tomahawk chop and do the chanting and all that stuff? Did you feel anything about it? Did you feel like, hey, it's just part of the culture, it's whatever? Tell me about that.
I think that with maybe some of the tones and ideas that we're going into, microaggressions regarding racism, that there's context for everything. There's just context with every interaction in life. And so I think I personally fall in the line of that you can say the wrong thing, but in the right context. If you say it to a friend who maybe you've gained their trust through that might be different than, I guess in this example, maybe a drunk person who's not Native American, with a sacred religious ceremonial top hat, top dress, falling off sideways, the paint, doing the chop, So in that context, you can say it's disrespectful. And I can understand how natives feel different about that. You could say, no, it's representing them as warriors, in that sense. And I go, and so, people can counter, oh, so we're all warriors. We're all bloodthirsty savages who just get upset. I better go to anger management then, um, so in my personal opinion, I was happy to finally see that go, because that's just profiting off a culture and not really paying its due respects to it. I mean, how much money was going to the local reservation?
Yeah.
It's like, and there's multiple instances where we can bring up capitalism and the effects it has of harvesting a culture. I see it on my local Facebook feed even. It's like the irony of some people to do that in the positions they're in. But again, I completely understand that, because maybe why would they identify as being native or indigenous, for that matter? That's really what we could be talking about, is indigenous populations and how important they are to the world context.
Yeah. So I really wanted to touch on the Braves thing, because last year, when the Braves were in the NLCS, no, sorry, the NLDS, National League Division Series, and they're playing the St. Louis Cardinals, one of the Cardinals pitchers, who identifies as Native American, he took exception to the tomahawk chop, right? And the chanting, and he said that that there's no place for that in this society, to basically be, what's the words that I'm looking for? Anyway, to use a culture as your mascot, in a sense, right? And a lot of Braves fans, including friends of mine, I'm a Braves fan. A lot of Braves fans were like, "Oh, suck it up, we've done this forever," and yada yada. And in my head, I was like, is that an excuse to keep doing it? We've done this forever. It shouldn't be reason why you keep doing something. It shouldn't be the reason why you don't listen to the concerns of your fellow man. So that's why I wanted to get your take on it anyway, because, but like you said, it's about capitalism in a lot of cases, right? Like they know that they profit in all their merchandising off of the use of these symbols and stuff. Would you feel like it would sort of make things better if they did, in fact, say, okay, we are profiting off of using the tomahawk chop, or in the case of Washington, we profited the off of this logo, or the Cleveland Indians, for instance, but we're going to give a percentage of that, a significant chunk of that, to um, uh, our local indigenous populations. If they did that, do you think that would sort of mend fences a little, or what do you think about that sort of solution?
Well, I guess maybe before I was being maybe a little bit down the line, I think that they could do that act after they change their name too. They could maybe give those reparations, if you will, to the tribe. I don't know who the Cleveland Indians give that to. That's just trying to represent all indigenous people of this country, I guess.
Yeah,
It's the name should be changed because in that context, it is offensive to our culture to do that. That's my personal hardline opinion. I mean,
yeah,
it's finally because they were shamed by major corporate sponsors. Washington changed their name. I mean, it might be what has to happen to the Braves and to Cleveland and to those people who say, "Oh, we've been doing this forever. What should we change?" Well, man, were they asleep in history or what's going on? Uh, if we never changed the status quo for anything, women wouldn't have the right to vote. I mean, you can go on and on. That's just as I guess maybe I'm not sure if you were alluding to this, but I will take the bait and say that's a ridiculous statement to make that you can't elevate society to a higher standard by actually attempting to identify with other people. And maybe that's part of, like I said, the whole my personal transformation through the past couple of months about just trying to identify with the most marginalized people in society because I'm not sure I should expect other people to hear me if I don't listen to them.